Welcome to our podcast, Parenting by the Pint. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, Minivan Mafia. Lauren and I are longtime friends from Chicagoland that love getting together to chat about life, kids, family, and beer.
Each week, we'll feature a brewery and sample at least 2 of their beers.
We'll also discuss a variety of topics ranging from parenting, pop culture, travel, marriage, and just about anything else that comes to mind. Hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
We're
We're going to do
back.
something that you guys have, I hope, grown to enjoy, where we deviate slightly from our regular format and enjoy a cocktail of our choice while talking about something
Totally
probably
random.
not child or
Yeah.
family related. I guess depending this particular time, depending on exactly what we chose to research, but in my case it is not child
Mine
related.
is not child related at all. Yep.
Yeah.
Nope. All right.
So we're going to start with our cocktails,
Drinks.
and I'm going to tell you what I picked to make myself. I decided to go with an Aperol Spritz, which is something I drank a lot of in Italy. It's a very Italian cocktail, often described as an Italian sunset in a glass.
Oh.
It originated in Padua. For those of you who like Shakespeare, you know that town. It's kind of their most popular, I think, cocktail. And it's got Aperol in it, which is it's like kind of like an orange bitter liqueur.
Definitely bitter
And
to me.
yeah, pretty bitter.
Mhm.
Now that I'm talking about it a little bit, I think it's possible that I've talked about Aperol before on the podcast because it sounds in my brain a little familiar, but it might be we've done cocktails before. So
Sure.
I'll give you guys a
Yeah.
little more of a spiel about the spritz, and then I'll have a sip, and Lauren, you can tell me about your drink.
Cool.
The liqueur Aperol was created by two brothers in Padua, Luigi and Silvia Barbieri, in 1919. So it's about 100 years old.
Okay.
They incorporated it into this cocktail. The Spritz is a German Austrian drink that comes back from the 19th century. And in like the 1950s, the Barbieri's aperitif kind of took over Campari in popularity.
Yeah.
So this became a little more popular than Campari at that time. They started doing like television advertising and things like that. And it just became a very popular drink for lunchtime and summer evenings. It's a very refreshing drink when made correctly, which I think is really important because as I've already said, it can be bitter. And if you overdo it on the Aperol, I feel like it just does not taste good. You really got to balance out. It's got Prosecco in it. It's also got a splash of cream soda or club. So you have a little bit of leeway, I think, with your soda choice. I went with cream soda. I often do because it's sweet. So I think it balances out the bitter really well. I think some people do tonic and some people just do sparkling water. I think both of those maybe add to the bitterness. So I sort of lean toward cream soda, which is more traditional also.
I like that. I've had it before, but to me it's always been quite bitter when I've had it. I haven't made it, but I feel like if it had a little bit more sweetness, I might enjoy it. So that's an interesting addition to, like, I think when I had it, it was just like soda water or something, like not, something with a little carbonation, but not much flavor to it.
I also think that if you're a little, and I use that word strongly, a little heavy-handed on the Prosecco, you balance out that bitterness kind of nicely because you're still kind of adding a little, it's really just making the drink a little bit bigger, not necessarily shifting
Yeah.
the balance of things. I
Hmm.
tend to just put a little bit more Prosecco than the recipe calls for, just to kind of like take the edge off of that Aperol if it's a little strong, which is what I
Yeah.
did with my drink.
Hmm.
And I gave it a tiny sip before we started recording to make sure I wasn't going to spit it out.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's a pretty good balance. I'm pretty
Okay.
happy with it.
All
So
right. I do
that's what
have
I got going on.
I have the
Aperol Spritz.
necessary ingredients, so I might give it another shot with a little bit of sweetness to it at some
I
point.
will say
So,
that they often put an orange slice in it. I unfortunately was fresh out of oranges,
hmm.
and today was just not a day that I was going to the grocery store
No,
for an orange.
yeah,
So I
totally get
didn't.
it. No,
So
totally
I
reasonable.
am, yes, missing my orange slice, but I feel
That's
like we're
okay.
doing what I need to do with it. So
Like that's totally fair. That's just yeah, that's just for
the
appearances,
garnish,
really.
it does
The
give it a little
garnish
something,
can,
but it is also
it,
garnish.
yeah, not necessary. Some okay, exciting, exciting. I like it. I'm gonna give it another try sometime.
Well, maybe I'll make
Um,
one for you next time we're
I
together.
like it. I like it. Good plan. So I went completely opposite. I made a White Russian, which
Ooh,
I almost never drink,
I
but
love it.
I decided to make it. So White Russian is just coffee liqueur, vodka, and cream. I actually didn't have cream, but I did put my milk in the frother before I put it in
Ooh,
and mix it, so it made it
ah,
a little thicker and fluffier, kind of
I
like a
love
cream,
that.
and then put it over ice. So that is what
That's
I
pretty
am drinking.
resourceful. I
Right?
like
I thought so.
your
Yeah.
improv there, where you're like, well, I don't have any cream, but you know what I do have? I've got frothed milk.
I
And I
do. Yeah.
personally
Hmm.
use frothed milk in my coffee at this
Same.
point. I don't buy half and half or anything like
Yeah.
that
I
anymore.
froth my milk.
I just use frothed milk, and it's, first of all, obviously way more cost effective because I
Oh
already have
God, yeah.
milk in my
Hmm.
house.
Yep.
And secondly, it's equally good. I very much appreciate it. It
Hmm.
tastes great in my coffee. So
Yeah. I enjoy it
good
too. So
call, man.
I figured why not. So White Russian is much newer than your drink, but actually the first reference to any kind of something similar was a Black Russian, which first
Okay.
appeared in 1949 at a hotel in Brussels. And the only difference is it doesn't have cream. It's the coffee liqueur and the vodka.
Okay.
So that's the only difference. So the White Russian, the first time it was like documented anywhere was a recipe in a California newspaper in 1965. And at the time, Southern Comfort actually had, which they no longer make, a coffee liqueur. So it was
Oh,
actually listed as Southern vodka and cream, just as the three ingredients. So they no longer make whatever that coffee liqueur was, but that company made. So I'm using Kahlua today. So they have
I
different,
appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah, that
they
sounds
have
good.
different variations. So you can put ice cream in it instead of cream if you want to make it like a dessert drink.
Okay.
Uh, a dirty Russian just adds chocolate syrup to it.
Ooh.
You
Mhm.
can make a blonde Russian with Irish cream like Bailey's instead of
Okay.
Kahlua. And
Okay.
then there's a skinny Russian, which is sometimes referred to as the Anna Kournikova, the famous tennis star, because it's using skim milk as a lighter option, less
Oh,
calories.
yeah.
There's also something called the
Okay.
Colorado Bulldog, which adds a splash of cola, which I don't think sounds good at all. So I'm not participating in that
Yeah,
one.
I don't know about
Yeah.
that.
None of it has anything to do with Russia at all. It's literally only called that because it's vodka is like
I was
one
gonna
of the
say, I
main
guess vodka,
ingredients.
right? It's
It
like the
has,
only
yeah,
real
yeah. So it has nothing
connection.
to do with Russia, literally at all.
Mm.
So, but it
Alright.
became really popular after the like 90s cult classic movie, The Big Lebowski, because
Yeah.
the dude always had a White Russian everywhere throughout the movie. That was his drink, but he refers to it as a Caucasian, which I kind of
Yeah.
love.
That's
So,
fantastic. My brother
yeah.
has this wonderful story about taking his kids trick-or-treating and running into the dude,
Mm.
someone, paying tribute to the dude.
Right, right, right.
And when said dude answered the door, my brother promptly asked, "Where's your white Russian?" And he held up one finger and ran away and then came back with a white Russian.
Nice. I love
And
it.
I have to say I do love costumes that have a prop of
Oh yeah.
alcohol or something like that. I feel like those are great props. It's like it's just I don't know.
Yeah,
It
it
just
adds
adds.
to it. I'm a fan. I am a fan. So yeah, but I couldn't tell you the last time I had this drink, but I was like, you know what? This is what I'm going with today. So
Yeah,
that's
that
what
was a
we're
good choice.
drinking
I
tonight.
like that. I like
Yeah.
that. I went spritz more because of my recent history. Honestly, before I went to Italy, I was like forcing myself to fall in love with it. Like I was like,
Uh,
I have to like this thing because
it's a
I'm
good
gonna drink it
option
every
to
day,
drink. Yeah.
right? Well, and it was summer. Like, don't get me wrong, I love
Mm,
wine, but I was like, but what if I'm
yeah.
dying? Like,
Wine is
from
not a
it's hot outside.
refreshing drink.
Well,
Exactly.
and if you
So yeah.
know me at all, you know that I'm not a huge fan of eating outdoors, but that's pretty
Mhm.
common in
Oh, for
Italy
sure.
and
Yeah.
Greece, which was the other
Hmm.
place we went. And like,
Yeah.
I was like, if I'm gonna sit outside, I'm gonna need something cold and refreshing. And don't get me wrong, water is great,
Yeah.
but you know,
Yeah. You'd like a drink. I get it.
I
Totally. So
wouldn't
you like
mind
to
a
have an
drink.
option. Yep. I like it.
Yes.
Cool.
So yeah,
Fantastic.
well, that's great. We are gonna sip on these cocktails
Yeah.
and talk to you guys about a topic that we have not yet ever discussed and
Mhm.
maybe is gonna catch you off guard. We're gonna talk about cults. We're gonna talk
Yeah.
about cults, you guys.
Love
Um,
it.
just something that popped into our brains at one point. Lauren suggested this, and I kind of was like, we should do cocktails and cults. Um,
Yep.
whenever we do one of these off the wall episode topics, I think that cocktails are a nice pair with that.
I totally think so. Because it's
So
a
we
little off
did,
of the normal. So
yeah.
yeah.
So I feel like that really matches well with a cocktail, these off the wall topics. And so here we are, we're going to talk about cults. And I'm sure that if I gave you a chance to think about it, you would guess which direction I was going to go with
Ooh.
finding some cults to share with you guys. And I'm going to talk about cat cults.
Oh, I love it.
So here we go. As most people know, there
Oh.
are the worship of cats has gone back many, many
Oh
years
my
to the
gosh.
Egyptians.
Yeah.
There is an Egyptian goddess called Bast that emerged, if you will, around 3000 BC as a lioness.
Mm. Okay.
Um, she was the warrior goddess of the sun, and about 2000 years later, her cult was still going strong.
Wow, go her.
Yeah. So, over the years, she's mellowed into a domestic cat, the
Hmm.
goddess Bast.
Okay.
Um, Many ancient civilizations considered cats, prized because
Hmm.
they controlled the rodent population and protected food stores. They did appreciate how adorable they were, which, is of course not surprising to me at all as an appreciator of cats.
True, true.
Egyptians allowed cats to live in their homes. And Bast, I'm just going to tell you a couple things. Bast was the goddess of, not just the sun, but a couple of things here for fun. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about a more recent cat cult that has a little bit more detail, a little bit more going on.
All right.
Bast was the goddess of the sunrise, so she's the daughter of Ra, the god of the sun. So that's
Makes sense.
her
Okay.
origin story. Um, Goddess of fire, goddess of fertility, kind of all the things that all the Egyptian gods
Yeah, right? I
are
feel like
goddess of physical pleasure,
oh, well, fertility and that
perfume,
go together. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
uh, protection of from disease, which kind of makes sense because they valued cats because they protected them from rodents and things like that. So there was a
Hmm.
connection there.
Hmm.
Um, they were revered in ancient Egypt, and killing one was seen as much more than just unlucky. It was punishable by death
Whoa.
if you killed a
Okay.
cat.
That's cats are
And
important.
when a treasured cat died, it was mummified and sent to a special cat cemetery.
Oh,
I know it's kind of adorable.
it is.
There is a city, Bubastis, where over 300,000 cats were buried.
Holy crap. That's a lot of cats. My God.
I know. It's so
Oh,
many.
yeah.
And to kind of put it into a recent context,
Mhm.
Bast is the god that exists in the Black Panther movie.
Oh, okay.
That is who they're seeing
Yeah.
in the realm where the previous Black Panthers are. I don't
Sure,
recall.
sure.
They give it a name. I don't
Yeah, I don't
remember what that realm
remember.
is called.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so there's
Huh.
some old-timey cult stuff for you, more of
Yeah.
a, worship and then but
Sure.
aren't cults a lot of there's a lot of worship going on in cults. That seems to be a pretty,
Yeah. There's
common
some higher
theme.
power that people believe in, generally speaking, and that's an overarching theme of a cult. I mean, Christianity was thought of a cult for hundreds of years before it actually was called a religion. So when it first,
Yeah,
as was Islam, so they were both considered by cults when they started, and then they eventually became what we know as what we call religions. But at the time, it was
sure.
technically people thought, no, this is just a crazy cult. So, you know,
Yeah, I could
there's a
see
lot of
that. I could see that.
similarities.
So
I get it.
maybe well, what I'm about to
Mm.
describe to you, I don't believe is ever going to become a religion.
Yeah.
Sorry, cat for people, but only because it has somewhat it's basically dissipated at this point. This cult
hmm
doesn't exist really any longer as far as I
hmm
could tell.
Yeah.
um so probably, let's see, maybe about 10 plus years ago,
hmm
this woman who was a religious leader, of course,
Of course.
it's often part of it,
hmm
Reverend Cheryl Ruthven started a religious cult of followers that believe that cats are divine
Oh,
and
okay.
that they will carry the 144,000 souls mentioned in the book of Revelation.
Ah,
So ferrying souls, right? So
gotcha.
that's what their
hmm hmm
role is, and her belief was that they would play a role in ferrying souls in the book of Revelation, even though there's no mention
They're
of
not
that.
in
This
it,
is
but that's her
just
belief.
her
She thinks
interpretation.
the cats are gonna help take the souls with them.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So
I got it.
without going into too much detail, because I'm not here to bore you with a big
Yeah.
long story about this woman's history, she kind of started out as like a religious leader.
hmm
She started in Washington. She moved to Tennessee over the years. She kind of started her following in Washington and really was more of a very religious focused, not
hmm
really the cat thing. That sort of
Okay.
came later. She was one of those people that claimed that she had a direct contact with God, that she was
Oh
speaking
yeah.
God's words,
hmm
and you're not allowed to disagree with her. And if you disobeyed, you were banished. And the reason why her organization is somewhat no longer in existence is because obviously at some point some followers sort of decided this was a cult and
Yeah.
tried to in her opinion besmirch its name.
Okay.
She had people bowing down to her during worship. She claimed to be a messiah figure. They drank communion juice tinged with her blood. Like,
Wow.
oh, it
Okay.
got pretty extreme. At
That's pretty
one
crazy,
point,
but okay.
yeah. Um, at one point, her cat, this leader, Ava, died. And
Oh.
she was just like really distraught about the whole thing and took it as a sign to start a cat rescue.
Oh.
Okay, so that's
I can,
nice.
yeah, I get that. Okay.
Yeah, so she founded this rescue. It's called Eva's Eden.
Hmm.
And she thought it would be a good way to, like, appreciate her memory and things like that. And she insisted that her followers foster cats by
Okay.
the dozens. Some
Oh.
followers had 30 or 40 cats in their homes. They
Oh
fed the
wow.
cats before they fed their children. They
Jeez.
cared more deep. They were supposed to care more for the cats than for the children because these are the creatures that will be ferrying
The
your
souls and
souls.
that's yeah.
Yes, and as long as
Okay.
you took care of them, then in your time of need, they would transform and they would take care of you.
Okay.
So that's pretty much the premise of the cat cult that I discovered. Like I said, they lost some followers in about 2016
Mm-hmm.
and have kind of disbanded since then. So
Gotcha.
that's and the rescue and everything, like their Facebook page is gone, and
gone.
so I couldn't honestly tell you if they still exist in any capacity, but in in the public sense,
they're
they
gone.
don't seem to.
Yeah. That's fascinating. It's amazing the things that people believe in. I am going to piggyback slightly off that, not talking about the cult I was going to talk about, but talk about a cult that me and my husband just watched a documentary on like a week ago.
Nice.
Partially because it talks about the 144,000 souls that are going to be. So I don't know if you've seen this. There's I don't know what it's on right now, if it's on Netflix or some other crazy streaming something. But the cult was called Love Has Won, but the show was called Mother God, I believe.
Okay. So that's the show that's telling you about cults?
This person, yes. So this is a tiny cult, just one cult. Love Has Won, it was the name of the cult. It was led by a woman named Amy Carlson, who believed she was Mother God. I'm fairly confident she was schizophrenic. But she also claimed that she was a 19 billion year old being who has been reincarnated as Jesus, Cleopatra, Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe, and she was going to be the one to usher the 144,000 people into a fifth dimension where a group of people are already there, and she believed that Robin Williams was one of the people who spoke to her and through her that would help usher these people into this next dimension. She claimed that Donald Trump was her father in a past life.
I think I've heard of this.
She all kinds of interesting beliefs. I mean, but at most there were like 30 people. I mean, it was a very small group of people, but she wound up taking the group to Hawaii, and then they had protests that ushered her out of Hawaii. They wound up in Colorado. Her family actually wound up doing a wellness check on her because the group was posting things, and she believed that I don't remember what she was taking. Colloidal silver would save her. She was turning blue like a Smurf because she was
colloidal
drinking
silver, man.
It like by the gallons she was drinking it.
That's too much.
So
I mean, any amount,
any of it is too much, but it was excessive. And then she was controlling how much people ate. So then the belief was to stop eating and to starve yourself, because if you starved yourself, you would be closer to God. And I'm sure I'm getting some of the details off, but it was a whole bunch of craziness. And eventually the cops did a wellness check and found her mummified body that was dead in this like trailer in Colorado that her followers were worshiping essentially to her body, thinking that the people in the next dimension would be picking her up at some point to go on to the next life. Yeah, it was crazy. So
that's
so I watched that.
That's a lot.
Recently.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah, it definitely was a lot. So but anyway, so that was one we watched recently. But the one I was actually going to talk about was one that is recent. It's in like around the 70s through 80s. And it was Rajneesh Puram. The guy's name was Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. And he was essentially like an Indian yogi who was effectively kicked out of India for his beliefs and things. And they referred to him as Osho. He was born in the 30s. There's a show on Netflix called Wild Wild Country, and that's what this is based off of. So it was, my husband says that two of the current rules of modern day cults is give me all your money and I can have sex with whoever I want as the leader of the cult. So those were two overwhelming parts of this. Was give me all your money. I'm building this huge compound in Oregon. So they built this compound. They had hundreds of people, maybe up to 1,000 at one point, but they were very into embracing sexual liberation and had crazy like musical dances, nakedness things. People were doing all kinds of craziness. But Osho was the one who was behind it, and he had a second in command named Sheila. So they're doing all their stuff, but then they want to try and take over the government in their area, like the local government. They try and take over like the seats of the county in the town of Antelope, Oregon. It eventually all kind of unraveled when some of the higher ups in this organization actually got arrested for plotting to assassinate the U.S. attorney at the time.
Jeez.
In addition to being responsible for the first recorded bioterrorist attack, which was when they actually injected salmonella bacteria into salad products at local restaurants, not killing anyone, but sickening over 700 people. Like,
Whoa.
yeah, crazy.
Oof.
So Sheila, the second in command, actually wound up fleeing to Switzerland. She eventually did jail time. And Rajneesh was deported in 1985. 21 countries denied him entry. They're like, we don't want you. We don't want anything to do with you. He wound up back in India where he was for like 4 or 5 years before he actually passed away in 1990. And then the compound in Oregon is no longer there. It was just leveled in
Yeah.
1985. But it was a very interesting documentary to watch. It was probably, I don't remember how many episodes, maybe 6. I mean, it was like a mini series, but it was fascinating. And we've been watching a number of things like that to be like, what kind of people, like, what's your mentality at the time has to be looking for something to believe in. Like,
Yes.
something to hold on to, something higher than you, something to believe that it exists out there that is higher than us. So that one was interesting. We recently, the other day, watched a documentary called Buddha Field.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that one.
No.
It's essentially, I think it was a Venezuelan um man who was like the son of a wealthy rancher who moved to the US and really wanted to become an actor and a ballet dancer, and he essentially failed at both of those. He even failed at porn. Like he like couldn't be
Woof.
an actor in anything.
Sorry, dude.
So then he um got people to follow him and believe that he had powers and had a connection to, whatever belief you want to believe, and through him you would get knowledge that you couldn't otherwise get. But what's interesting about him versus the Mother of God one is I think that woman was actually believing the things she was saying. Like she was probably had a mental
Right.
illness, probably.
Right.
He was tricking people because eventually they figured out like he would put his hand to your forehead and like push and claim that you were going to be able to get this knowledge, and you would see a light flash before your eyes. Well, some of the followers eventually figured out he just had a flashlight in his hand that he was just flashing. So he knew it wasn't real, but he was just trying to get people to follow him because then they would pay for his everything, for his living. They would carry things for him. They would carry his chair when they went to the beach. They would, give him services, which would be like they would massage him and do things, and eventually wound up being sexual favors and things like that. But he would walk everywhere around in a Speedo. Like he got so much plastic surgery that he looked plastic. So it's like some of these organizations truly believe in what they're speaking, and other organizations are, I'm just tricking you to get what I want. And there is the two different kind of things. The ones that truly believe that there is some higher power religious, thing in what they're saying. The other people are just trying to get money and stuff from you. So there's the divide that I've seen. There's so many crazy cults out there though. Like There's
Yeah.
hundreds of hours of documentaries about
Yep.
crazy
I mean,
cults and
yeah. I mean, we've only touched on a couple here, you guys, and like
not
there
even
seems
like the big ones.
no. Well, and me and you often try to stay away from something controversial per se.
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
yeah, I mean, there are organizations that exist currently and
Mhm,
organizations that have existed that
mhm.
are big and have had a big impact on
Oh,
history and on
thousands of
society.
people. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
how many people
those
died
are
in Jonestown? Like hundreds, I think. And Heaven's
yeah.
Gate, who thought they were going to get picked up by a UFO or something. Like there were people that committed suicide willingly, thinking that that's how they got to the next,
Yeah.
whatever level. But yeah, some people had lots and lots of people over lots of years believing in what their teachings were, which does beg the question of where's the line between religion and cult, which I'm not going to get into, but some of these
Sure.
crazy ones you're like, oh no, that's crazy, but other ones you're like, maybe that's not so crazy. Maybe that's just
Yeah.
another god. Like, so it's sometimes
Yeah.
hard to distinguish between this is something reasonable to believe in if you're looking for a belief system, and this crazy lady doing meth in her trailer is, God reincarnated. So I don't believe that one. So
Yeah, that's a stretch.
I feel like that one's a stretch, but it's
Yeah.
interesting. I think it's interesting just to learn about different things. And my husband and I have had conversations when watching these, like, clearly there are people out there who are searching for something to believe in and something, a group to feel like not even believe in, but to feel like they're a part of. And that's a big
Uh-huh.
thing about cults, is it does feel like a family, and many of these wind up living together in a
Yeah.
group, in a convent, in a thing similar to that, and they've become a family.
I
So
think
like,
that's
yeah.
something I was going to kind of bring up when you were talking about, how do you reach that point where
Mhm,
you've convinced yourself that this is something you want to be a part of. And I think that, feeling isolated or feeling alone and looking for that family feeling or that togetherness or community is
mhm,
something that I think kind of draws people in who are still making like common sense decisions. Like
mhm.
and then
They
you
still
just,
have jobs, they still have, like, they're
yeah.
functioning adults in society
And
for
I
the
always
most part.
say,
Yeah.
whenever my husband and I, when we talk about subjects sort of like this, where we're like, well, how did this person come to the conclusion that what they did, whatever this thing is,
Sure.
was a
Mhm,
good idea? And clearly, whatever we're talking about is either a crime or just something wrong or whatever.
mhm,
And what I've kind of learned is that you end up surrounding yourself with people at some point where that does sound like a good idea, where
mhm,
there's no one really to tell you, no, that's going too far, or you're doing something you shouldn't, or,
mhm,
and I think that, that is something in this cult environment that kind of takes it to the extreme, obviously. I mean,
yeah.
someone committing a crime or doing something wrong is obviously terrible, but when you're talking about one person doing something wrong, you're kind of like, well, probably were in a group of people that maybe this just didn't seem like a bad idea. So that whoever their support system wasn't necessarily discouraging that,
Mhm.
but when you're talking about a cult, you're putting it on like a grand scale a lot of times. And I think that's how you end up in that position. I think that's how you end up in there, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, some of these, when you hear people, they realize also they've gotten in and they're in too deep, but
hmm.
they don't want to leave that sense of community because they feel like they wouldn't have anything anymore. They wouldn't have people or support system, or a lot of
Yeah,
people left their to join this group, and
right.
then they're in too deep and they feel like they can't leave because they don't have an alternative. It's almost domestic violence situation. Like, you feel like you have nowhere to go. And this is where you're
Right.
at now. But even if you realize you don't want to, you think, well, what is my alternative? And people have given all their money and everything
hmm.
else to this organization, and now they feel stuck,
Yeah.
which is interesting. And obviously there's always alternatives, but I understand the feeling of I've invested everything I have into this. Now what am I supposed to do? And that
Right.
feels also like it's a reason that people stay in some of these people, that sense of community, and that's what they've invested. It's now part
Right.
of kind of who they think they are, is this group.
Right.
So it's just interesting. It's also an interesting look into just the human psyche in general, to see, how people get kind of pulled into different groups and organizations, sometimes with the, guise of I can give you something you don't have. And whether that be, a certain lifestyle or family or whatever, it's definitely, it's just interesting. I find it
Yeah.
interesting.
I agree. It isn't.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
It is fascinating.
I
That
find, yeah.
is definitely the case. I definitely find it fascinating.
Yes.
And hope that I maintain the relationships with people that I have, so that I do not get drawn into a cat cult or other type of cult someday.
Yes. I would agree. I will try and keep you from
Yeah. Thank you.
the cat cult.
I
So
appreciate that.
same.
Yeah,
Make
if you
sure I
could
don't
just, I
join
will
some
do my best.
craziness.
If I'm starting to get a bad feeling, I'll just be like, "Hey, are you sure that's what you're gonna do this weekend? I mean," and then you can be
Yeah.
like, "No, I'm sure for
Yeah.
this reason," and then I can make a decision about whether or not intervention is necessary,
That
and vice
sounds
versa.
good. Great.
So, all right,
Fantastic. So,
yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna finish my spritz, and you can finish your White Russian, and
fantastic.
we'll wrap up this episode by thanking you guys for joining us, and catch you guys next time when we will talk about something that isn't cult related.
Yes. We'll go back to the usual and figure out what, yeah.
Absolutely, you guys.
For sure. But thank you for entertaining us and participating in
yeah.
a fun conversation that's out of the ordinary. So,
Oh yeah. We'll
all
catch you guys
right.
next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks everyone for listening to the latest musings from Parenting by the Pint.
Be sure to find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to us wherever you find your podcasts.
Have a great week, and cheers to you all.